The entire 2024 presidential election might hinge on Arab American protests in Michigan. Hundreds of thousands of potential voters in the state might refuse to vote, and that could spell disaster in the state that will likely have razor-thin margins. Michigan's 15 electoral votes are crucial, but what happens if a sizable demographic in the state just doesn't show up? Let's look at the numbers. Michigan is home to one of the largest Arab American populations in the United States. Michigan is the only state where Arabs account for more than 1% of the population. If they were a country, they'd be bigger than Samoa. Most of this population lives in the city of Dearborn, a suburb of Detroit. Dearborn is basically the Arab American capital of the country, where even the billboards are in Arabic. This community is not just large, it's active in politics. They made their political power known in the Democratic primary. Joe Biden was on the ticket back then, and in an organized protest vote by Arab American groups, over 100,000 voters chose the uncommitted option, rather than vote for any candidate on the ticket. Now, it's not all that rare for people in Michigan to vote uncommitted, but it is unprecedented for the number to be this high. In 2012, the last time there was an incumbent Democratic administration, only about 20,000 people chose to vote uncommitted in the Michigan primary. In 2024, it was about 5 times that number. Clearly, Arab Americans wanted to send a message. If you want our votes, you better start talking peace, or at least stop talking bombs. And in a state like Michigan, where elections are often close, candidates ignore these protests at their own peril. The Arab American Institute did some research on this issue earlier in the spring of 2024. They commissioned a poll of 900 Arab American voters in 4 key states: Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Here's what they found. In 2020, President Biden beat former President Donald Trump by 59% to 35% within the Arab American demographic. In the 2024 poll, Biden was losing to Trump by 32% to 18%. If you extrapolate this poll's results to Election Day 2024, there would have been a significant potential loss for President Biden of 177,000 votes in the 4 key states that have the largest Arab populations, with 91,000 of this possible loss occurring in Michigan alone. But with Joe Biden out of the race, things have to be different now, right? Well, yes and no. When Vice President Harris became the new Democratic nominee, there was a huge shift in enthusiasm across all traditionally Democratic demographics, including Arab Americans. The nonprofit Black Muslim Leadership Council had withheld its support from Biden, but quickly threw their weight behind Harris. Then a new group called Muslim Women for Harris Walls formed and supported the ticket, only to withdraw their support during the Democratic National Convention when a Palestinian speaker from the uncommitted movement was denied a chance to speak at the convention. But a week later, the group had reformed and again threw their support behind Harris. This whiplash is indicative of the complicated and fragile relationships involved here. Now you might be wondering, what about the Republicans? Well, the GOP has historically had less luck with the Arab American vote. Probably because their Middle East policy for the past 3 decades has not been great. But if the Arab American community feels betrayed or ignored by the Democrats, they might not only sit out the election, they could shift, however slightly, towards Republicans who at least pretend to understand their concerns. When you compare the number of Arab Americans who identify as Republican now versus in 2020, the numbers are about the same. And when combined with the dramatic decline in Democratic identification, that could possibly be enough to flip a few swing states. So why does all this matter? Because Michigan is Michigan, and we're all going to be glued to our screens come election night, watching those county-by-county breakdowns like our lives depend on it, because in the way they do. So to all the campaign managers and consultants out there, here's a bit of advice. If you're planning on winning in Michigan, you might want to start paying attention to what's happening in Dearborn, because if you don't, you might just find yourself out of the race and wondering what went wrong.